Welcome to the Arab American News.
Thanks for having me.
We
Really
have been
excited to be
waiting
here.
for this opportunity for a long time, so we can have a discussion with you on your campaign. We are right now at the end of February, beginning of March. We only have a few months left for the primary in August. How do you feel about this campaign?
I feel great. Look, this is the opportunity to demonstrate what is possible when you come together around a politics that's focused on people and not the same old corporations who've bought and sold our politics for a long time. And so we've been all over the state of Michigan, meeting all kinds of people in all kinds of places. And I'll tell you, the reception has been so warm and so encouraging. We've signed up 50% of anybody who's heard me speak to volunteer for this campaign. 8,500 contributors from almost every state in the country have contributed, helping us to raise more than $2 million to move this forward. And I know that when we get our message out there to voters, they're excited about what we have to offer because this is a different look on our politics. This is the opportunity to think about.
What are the things that you're talking about that attracts people the most to your campaign?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what they're talking about, and I'll tell you why I think this matters right now. No matter where you go, across over 100 different cities, people are asking the same basic questions. Doesn't matter if you're talking to poor or working or retired people in places like Detroit or Dearborn, or poor or working or retired people in places like Kalkaska up in northern Michigan. They're asking about how we build an economy that doesn't lock people out. They're asking about how we rebuild our schools because they know that their kids aren't getting a fair shake at a great education. They're worried about access to health care. They're worried about their retirement. They're worried about whether or not they can have access to a clean Great Lakes, 21% of the world's fresh water, and if they can have water in places like Flint or Detroit at all. These questions really unite all of us, and what this politics is about, it's about uniting us around solutions to these problems. What we're talking about is things like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, being able to pass a single-payer universal health care program so nobody has to worry about going without health care in these United States of America. We're talking about being able to rebuild our schools, to shut down Line 5 to protect our Great Lakes, and to make sure that we're doing the investment in water infrastructure that makes sure that something like Flint never happens again. These kinds of solutions and how we would enact them are what people are focused on. And obviously the elephant in the room, in my case, is that I'm the first Egyptian American and Muslim American ever to run for governor in the US. And here's the thing that I know though. When you're talking about people's lives, you've taken the time to listen to them, understand their challenges, and then talk about solutions to those challenges, they don't pay attention as much to how you pray.
The whole thing just drop
Yeah.
out.
They're interested in what your solutions are.
Did you see people interested or questioning our roads, and the way that they have been deteriorated, the infrastructure that has fallen apart everywhere in Michigan? The other day we sent a reporter and a photographer to take some pictures of roads, and they are just incredibly bad. People have had accidents, their cars were ruined on the roads, especially recently after the major snowstorm that we had. What is your plan for the road? Because this has been really the biggest problem that no one has ever been able to resolve. I mean, they tried to pass a resolution, when the Snyder administration, the second term, and it failed. So what is your plan for the roads?
Sammy, you can't drive down the roads and not get frustrated. So the average Michigander spends something like $540 a year to repair their car because of how broken our roads are. 29% of our roads, 37% of our bridges don't meet basic competency criteria. And the reason why is not because we don't invest in them, it's because we don't invest smart. We're not investing enough, and we're not investing over the long term. So the example that I always use, and I'm a doctor, so I'll just borrow it for medicine, is if you get a cut, and it's a deep cut and you need stitches, you can either go and get the stitches, which is a long-term fix, or you can keep putting a Band-Aid over it. But the Band-Aid's not actually going to solve the problem, right? You're going to keep getting it infected, the Band-Aid's going to keep falling off, and the cut's going to continue. Right now, our roads are like that cut that we just keep putting a Band-Aid on.
You're talking about the patches
exactly.
versus resurfacing. And
exactly. And the reason why is because of the way that we fund infrastructure projects here in the state of Michigan. For big resurfacing kinds of projects, these things take many years, right? Because you have to work beyond the winter, et cetera. And these kinds of resurfacing projects, because they take a lot of time, the way that we fund government, which is every year through a budget that's proposed by the governor, that's ratified by the Congress, the state House and Senate, What happens is you'll be year 3 in a 7-year project, and all of a sudden the political winds change and they decide that they don't want to fund the project anymore. So what that's led to is a disincentivization of that kind of fix. So now we're just left putting Band-Aids on. So what we're proposing is the idea of what we're calling a pure Michigan infrastructure bank. And what it is it's an opportunity for us to take the money, put it into a bank where it could then leverage private investment as well, and then that bank then pays over the project over time. That'll buy us out of having to one-for-one fund these projects every single year and then worry about potentially not getting it done in year 3 of year 7, and instead think about how we then bring private capital in to invest and be able to invest in these things over the long term. It's an innovative way that other governments have used to be able to solve these big picture problems. And Osama, the infrastructure problem in Michigan doesn't end with roads. It's also water. It's also renewable energy, right? Sure. It's also broadband. It's also sewerage. All of these problems persist in Michigan, right? The Flint water crisis ultimately is an infrastructure problem. And we haven't had the funding or the wherewithal to actually think innovatively about how we do this, and it's time we did.
Abdul El Sayed, this is not your average American name, and you're running in a state that is not a small state. It's a large state, and you're running at a time when Muslims and Arabs are under the guns, in here, and there are fears, uncertainty, and the people don't know even they're going to stay in this country. And now we have Abdul Sayed running for governor. How do you convince other people that you can be a governor, and your name is Abdul Sayed and you're a Muslim and an Arab American?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, the first time anybody ever told me who knew anything about politics to run for office, it was actually President Bill Clinton. I was the valedictorian of my class at the University of Michigan in 2007, and I was selected to give the student speech. And the main speaker who anybody went to go watch, including my own parents, was President Clinton. And I gave my speech and he gave his speech, and he mentioned me in his speech. And then afterwards, he chased me down after we were done with the commencement, and he asked me, why are you going to medical school? Because I was going to medical school at the time. And I told him I love people, I love science, I think that's how I want to serve. And he just said, you've got a gift for communicating, and I hope that maybe someday you'll consider running for office. And the first thing that came to my mind was, I really appreciate you saying that, but I don't know if you saw my name. My name is Abdurrahman. It's 11 letters long. That's just the first name. This was 6 years after 9/11, of course. And I just said, that's just not in the cards for me, but I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm rebuilding the health department. I was the health commissioner in Detroit, watching as the Flint water crisis is happening. Our governor's poisoned 9,000 kids in a city that looks a lot like Detroit. And then watching as a man who has no business governing anyone is being elected president of the United States. And I had to ask myself, what's my responsibility to this moment? And Osama, I'll tell you, Sada, my wife, and I were just really blessed to have our first baby girl. She's 12 weeks old now. And I think about the world that she's going to grow up in. Her name is Emily.
Emily?
And I think about the world that Emily's growing up in, and I wonder how far we've come, because I was born and raised here, and I know what it's like to look up and say, there isn't anybody who looks like me or prays like me who is making decisions about my life. And I don't want Emily to have to be in the same circumstance. We have a responsibility right now to stand up and demand that America is in fact embracing of the diversity that we know is in communities like this one. And I had the privilege of growing up in a really diverse household. I was raised by my father, Abdul El Sayed, who's an immigrant from Alexandria, Egypt, and my stepmom, Jackie, who was born and raised in Gratiot County, Michigan. And my whole life, I've been having conversations with diverse Michiganders. And the thing I know about Michiganders is that they're really good people. And they don't ask as much how you pray, but what you pray for. And I can tell you that the things I pray for are the same things that most Michiganders pray for. I pray for my daughter, pray for my wife, I pray for my family, I pray for my state and my country, and I pray for the University of Michigan football team. And and when people realize that you're talking about the issues in their life and you're asking the questions that matter about how you can make their lives better, you really can inspire them to think differently about who leaders should be. And I learned this in medical school. I remember having patients who didn't want to be treated by somebody with a name like mine, but I persisted and I said, look, I'm not going to let anybody's bigotry get in the way of me doing my job by somebody. And when you sit down and you listen and you learn and you ask questions and then you work with somebody to be able to make their lives better, they at the end of the day don't care what you look like, they don't care how you pray like, they care about whether or not you've taken the time with them and whether or not you can competently get the job done. And I think our campaign has shown both of those.
Have you been confronted on the campaign trail? Can you tell us some of those stories?
Yeah. I mean, look, we, the amount of sort of online white supremacy we deal with every day is quite large. But at the end of the day, look, to me, you could pay attention to the very small minority who seem to speak so loudly, or you can pay attention to the majority who really just don't care. I mean, for us, ethnicity and faith are so important in the front of our minds because we have to inhabit them every day, right? But for most Americans, they don't walk around thinking about these things as much as those who speak the loudest on the issue make us think that they do. Do you see what I mean? And so for those folks, I don't really pay them attention. And to me, the best way to move forward is to force them to deal with the fact that after...
As an example, on your, like campaign trail, somebody just came to you and said, "I'm not going to vote for you because you're a Muslim." Well, and then you change his mind.
Well, we've had people come up and say, "Well, if you are elected, are you going to change the Constitution?" And I'll say, look, here's the thing about the Constitution is that Article 6 says that there shall be no religious test of leadership. And that Constitution is the Constitution that allows me to pray how I choose to pray every single day. And I would in no way, as somebody who benefits from that Constitution, change it for anybody else. And most of the time they'll come up to you and say, "You know what, that was a really thoughtful response, and I really appreciate your position." I mean, every day on the campaign trail, I have somebody who comes up to me and says, "I voted for Donald Trump and I'm voting for you." And I'll ask them why. And they'll say, "Well, look, what I was looking for was somebody who wasn't part of that same old broken political system. You aren't part of that, but you also have a credible background of being able to take on big problems and to solve them. And because you're a doctor, I know that you're competent and you can bring a set of skills about listening and about solving problems that I think we really need in government right now." And so, there are going to be the people whose positions are shaped by what they think about Arabs or Muslims. But for the most part, most people don't care. And for the ones who do, they were never going to vote for a Democrat anyway. And we shouldn't give them more voice than they try and take up anyway.
Let me ask you, would you have liked to have Mike Duggan's endorsement?
I worked for him for a couple of years. And one of the things that became clear to me throughout those 2 years is that his values are not my values. And I took a job to serve the city of Detroit, the people of the city of Detroit, not any one mayor or any one leader. And his values being what they are, we disagreed on a lot of things, whether that was the fact that our demolitions program in the city of Detroit is likely poisoning kids with lead, or the fact that the city shuts down water on people who don't have the means to pay for it. Both of those things to me are wrong. And insofar as his values dictated, because he's taking money from the same corporations, that those corporations and the other candidate that they're funding, that he would support them, I think that says more about what his allegiance is to, and that's to the shared donors and corporations rather than to the people in the city who we both served. So I don't control anyone else. I know what my values are, and I was raised in my household to stand up for my values no matter against whom. And if those are going to put me on the wrong side of certain leaders, well, then that tells you how broken our politics are and why they need changing.
When you decided to run for the governor's office, you were working for Mike Duggan. Did you, when you talked to him, did you sense a kind of resistance, or was he encouraging, like Bill Clinton, for example, or what was his reaction?
I think anybody who knows Mike Duggan knows that Mike Duggan cares about one person, and that's Mike Duggan. And so, there are a lot of reasons why my run is a bit of a threat to him, and also a lot of reasons why he wouldn't just say it, right? There have been a number of people from that administration who've jumped out and run for office, and he hasn't supported any of them. And I think that speaks a little bit to the way he thinks about how people who have worked with him should be able to move. And I didn't ask for his blessing because I didn't care about his blessing, but I did ask for his advice because he's been around for a long time. And what he told me when I decided to run was that he thought I'd be a great governor, and that if I ran and won, we'd make history, and if I ran and I didn't win, then we would be moving a really important conversation about our politics. So his choice to go elsewhere, I think, speaks more to the fact that the same system of politics that created him is trying to create the opponent who he endorsed, and that's exactly the system of politics that I oppose. And I think he and I both know that. I've got respect for his competence and abilities. I just disagree with his values.
Let me ask you, there is a poll that recently was done by Epic MRA that put you within margin of error with Bill Schuette. supposedly front runner on the Republican side. How do you feel about this? Were you surprised?
No, because I know that Michiganders are looking for something different in their politics. And I present something very different. I'll tell you, if Michigan goes from having, by 10,000 votes, elected Donald Trump to the White House, and then turns around and is on the cusp of electing a 33-year-old Muslim and Arab American governor, it says a lot about who we really are. And there are a lot of people who want to see that happen. And so, when you look at somebody like a Bill Schuette, right, who's only shown himself to be a craven usurper of power, and somebody who cares not about the people he serves, but about what those people can do for him, I think it is no challenge that somebody whose work has always been about serving people and serving them honestly in his work could turn around and beat somebody like Bill Schuette. I'm confident that if I'm the nominee, we don't just beat Bill Schuette, we thump Bill Schuette in November.
In April, I think the Democratic Party will have their state convention. What role are you going to be playing in that convention?
Well, it'll be a great opportunity to get out and meet the voters. We're, obviously our race is up for a primary and a vote in August. My hope is that it's a great opportunity to go out and meet Democrats from all over the state who'll come together and to show exactly what our movement looks like. A lot of folks have talked about where money is going to play and influence, but the thing that we have is people power. And to me, nothing is more important than a group of people who are committed to a kind of politics that they, as people living under the Constitution of these United States, deserve. And 2,500 active volunteers, 300 interns, having knocked on 100,000 doors, April's going to be a great opportunity to show people exactly what that looks like, and I look forward to that.
Linda Sarsour called me and challenged me that you would be the nominee of the Democratic Party. She has no doubt about it. And how is your reception in the Arab and Muslim community?
Yeah.
How much do you see excitement in your candidacy?
Well, I'll tell you, the most rewarding thing about running for office right now is watching young people of all stripes and colors see themselves in my candidacy. I remember what that was like watching Barack Obama in 2004, and for the first time seeing somebody and saying, oh my God, he kind of looks like me, right? His dad immigrated from Africa back in the 60s. My dad immigrated in the 70s, right? He was raised in a mixed household. I was raised in a mixed household. He's got brown skin. I've got brown skin, right? Like, wow, this person is like me, and he's so good at what he does. And that kind of inspiration, that's few and far between. And I know that it was so inspiring to me because I never saw it before. And I've been all over the state now, and everywhere I go, I meet these young people who range from age to from 5 to 25, who come up to me and afterwards and say, you know what, I'm really just thankful that you're doing this. And so, we've been able to marshal a community of young people who are excited about what politics can look like, and they see that represented in this campaign. And that includes people in the Arab American and Muslim American community, because, yeah, you're right, we're back on our heels as a community right now. And for somebody to stand up and say, even in these times, I believe that this country is big enough to have leadership that looks a little bit differently and prays a little bit differently, and that we belong. It's not time for us to hide. It is time for us to stand up and demand that we get to belong like everyone else, because our values dictate the same things that we would want for everybody else. And it's not even about us. It's about being able to solve injustices as we see them everywhere. And so I've seen the Arab and Muslim community come alive around this. I think there has been some hesitation because of fear, right? Because people will say, it's just not time yet. It's not time. Put your head down, right? And I think especially among the young people, they're like, no, this is not time to put our head down. This is our time to stand up.
Well, some people may say to you, I want to go back to the question of Duggan, that it was not prudent for you to attack your boss, former boss, or it's, Michael Duggan is a political power in the Democratic Party. Why would you want to offend them?
Yeah, if I cared about offending people, I wouldn't be doing this. Right? If I believed that the way to move forward in the world around how we express the kind of society we want was not to offend people in power who are creating the problems in the first place, I wouldn't be doing this. And so I'm not intending to offend anybody, but I don't really care if I do. Because if you find my standing up and fighting for people's water rights, or standing up and calling lead poisoning the evil that it is offensive, then I think you're probably just wrong. And I think if that is the positioning of people in power, then we have to rethink power. And so, to me, again, I think the responsibility for us is to stand up and demand that our government speaks to our values, regardless of who's on the other side of that. And I've never been somebody who's afraid of people in power. And I think right now, in particular, people are frustrated by the same old kind of government that has left us without basic things like access to good jobs, or access to healthcare, or access to good schools. They're part of the problem. And so it's time for us to stand up and just say, these are what our values dictate. And if your hold on power is in the way, then we're going to have to challenge your hold on power. And it's not about bothering you, right? We're going to do it with a big smile on our face, but it is about calling to a better politics that does deliver real goods and services for people. That's what I've always been about. That's what I will continue to be about. And I don't really care who's on the other side.
How much money you raised?
So we've raised over $2 million.
Over 2 million. How many volunteers do you have?
We've got, at this point, over 2,500, plus our 300 interns.
So you have about almost 2,800. 2,800 volunteers, $2.2 million in the. Does this qualify you for state match?
Yes, so we've got a self-funder in the race, and so we will also be getting another $1 million, $990,000 in state match.
Have you spent a lot of money on this campaign?
We spent a good amount, but we've still got a lot in the bank, and we're confident that we're going to have enough to put our message out there and to be able to compete with anybody. And we know that when people have heard my message versus any of the other messages, they're far more likely to vote for me than anyone else. And so we're really confident about our capacity to not only win this, but actually win it with considerable room to spare.
So you're confident?
Oh yeah.
Winning.
When I jumped out, I knew that there was a really great shot at winning, and every single day my confidence grows because I've seen what else is in the field. You've got folks who don't really know why they're doing this except for that they want power, and that's just not me. And I think when people have heard the differences in the messaging, it becomes obviously clear who the best future governor of Michigan would be.
Well, I think that the stretch to the primary, it starts maybe in June.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your plan to fight this battle? If you can at least give us some headlines.
Yeah.
We do not want anything in details that you can divulge, to your opponent.
So I think the key thing is we're continuing to build a base, right? Everywhere I go in this state, we're signing up 50% anybody in any room to volunteer. We're going to keep building our volunteer base. We've got some of the best organizers in the country working this campaign. Claire Sandberg, who comes to us from Bernie's campaign, who ran distributed organizing at the national level. She is organizing our campaign. And so our ability to put those volunteers in positions to have real impact across the state is going to be unparalleled. We're going to keep raising money. We're going to keep building support. We're going to keep getting our name out there. And then when Michiganders start paying attention to this race, we're going to have built the infrastructure to take advantage of that. Look, what it comes down to it is people vote for people. And they vote for people who they believe in the same things that they do and want those things for them and have shown them their ability to actually deliver on goods and services for folks. I'm the only person in this race for days who has that background, that experience set, and that ability to show exactly what we stand on. And I'm not bought out by corporations, so I can say things like, I believe in single-payer healthcare. I believe in a $15 minimum wage. I believe that we have to start rebuilding our schools. Those are all things I can uniquely say, and I don't pull punches. I say what I believe, and I believe what I say. It's pretty unique among people running for office these days. And so I'm pretty confident that once we've put the infrastructure down, people start paying attention to this race, we're going to see a lot of movement. And like I said, we're going to win this thing in pretty convincing fashion.
Are you, excited about the fact that your candidacy attracted the attention of national media and international media? But most likely, the most interesting that I have seen is the national media that has focused on this. Abdul, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the visit. Thank you. Good luck to your campaign, and we hope to see you, the governor in the state of Michigan.
I appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time.